Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today I will be reviewing Kenobi. The way this video review will be structured is that I will go episode by episode, and within each episode review, I will talk about the things that I did and did not like. I won't really go over plot points, but if you would like me to go over plot points of future reviews, then please let me know in the comments section down below. This episode was really good, and there were no problems with the show at all, except for one minor issue. I will obviously talk about the good parts first. I have to say, as a prequel fan, the beginning part of this episode was very emotional. I really like the fact that they recap the prequel trilogy just to remind us about what happened in the current situation that Obi-Wan is in, and where we last saw Anakin/Darth Vader last. It's a nice little thing to have because they really didn't need to do it, and they haven't done anything like this before, and I hope they continue this trend in future Star Wars shows. I got to say that seeing Order 66 happen yet again was both really sad and awesome. It was actually awesome just seeing a different perspective of what happened during Order 66. And we actually are inside the Jedi Temple, which is even better. There were a lot more brutal than I thought they would be in this scene. I had a feeling that they would show Order 66 again, but I didn't think that they would go this much into it. What I mean by that is the fact that at the beginning of this scene, we see a Jedi Master teaching some younglings, and then Order 66 is enacted. We see a bunch of clone troopers run into the room, and they immediately get killed. One thing I do want to mention is that the clone troopers are practical, not CGI. I think it looks a lot better than CGI. Not to say that the CGI was bad in the prequels, but it is better to have real actors inside of real armor. What I mean by the fact that they were more brutal in this scene was the fact that we just straight up see Jedi being slaughtered. They're not censoring anything, and they're not inferring. They're not doing any of that. They're just straight up showing us clone troopers shooting Jedi. On to other little things that I liked. I really like the sound of the lightsabers. The lightsabers have good bass to them, and they sound so good. Better than ever. I also like to mention that I really like the introduction of the Inquisitors in this episode. The new Inquisitor that we are introduced to has a pretty good introduction. We learn that she's a loose cannon and that she is obsessed with finding Obi-Wan. She's so obsessed to the point that the Grand Inquisitor and the fifth brother have to keep on reminding her of her status within the Inquisitor ranks. She has been warned multiple times to drop it, but she keeps on going, and I think this is a very interesting plotline. I was a bit worried about the Grand Inquisitor in this series, but so far I really like him. Granted, even though we have not seen much of him yet, I think he is portrayed well in this episode. He already has some pretty good quotes, and I also like the first scene in which he slowly pieces things together to figure out that there is a Jedi nearby. I also like the little detail that on the wall, you can see lightsaber marks. It's kind of cool that we are introduced to a new Jedi that we have never seen before. The funny part was that he used the Force in the same bar where the Inquisitors were, and I was thinking in my head, what a dumb thing to do. It's not really a complaint, it's just something I found funny. We are also introduced to Leia in this episode, and I have to say, the actress who plays her is really good. She's just as witty and smart as Princess Leia in the original trilogy. We actually got to see Alderaan for the first time, ever since it blew up. The way they depict Alderaan is exactly how I imagined it to be, kind of like a futuristic version of Earth in a way. We are also introduced to Leia's droid, and the droid's name is Lola. We even get a slight cameo from C-3PO. The camera does a basic shot over a crowd, and C-3PO just happens to be in the crowd, talking to somebody, and I found that pretty neat. I hope we get to see R2-D2 in the future. The other part of this that I really like is the fact that they did not reveal Darth Vader yet. I really like the fact that they set up the main story before we're even shown anything really in depth with Darth Vader or the Inquisitors. It just gets you more and more excited, because you know the more episodes you watch, the closer you are to seeing the man himself. I really like Owen in this episode. He was very antagonistic towards Obi-Wan, and in a way, I understand where he's coming from. There was a cold line where Obi-Wan says that he needs to prepare Luke for the future, and Owen responds with,
"Like you trained his father?"
That was such a cold clapback from Owen. Back to that Jedi that I talked about earlier. I honestly thought that this Jedi was going to be a main character in the show. And obviously he's not going to be anymore, and here's why. So this was the same Jedi that the Inquisitors caught earlier, but because of the new Inquisitor, I think her name is Reva, tries to attack the Jedi. But the Grand Inquisitor stopped her from doing it, because they needed to just capture him. He escapes, and later on in the episode, he tracks down Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan basically tells him to go away, because if he doesn't go away, then they're both going to be noticed. Later on in the episode, we see a body hanging in the air, and it's that same Jedi. I'm really surprised that they showed a dead body hanging in a Star Wars show. I just love to see the brutality in the show so far. There is also another point where the Inquisitor was trying to get information out of everybody, so she just started chopping people's hands off. It was insane. So now I get to the part where I had a bit of a problem. So Leia was kidnapped in this episode, and she was captured by some bounty hunters. I honestly thought it was going to be Boba Fett at first, but I'm fine that it wasn't him, because this is not his show, it's Obi-Wan's show. Anyways, Leia was being chased down in the forest, and I swear to God, these bounty hunters are stupid, because Leia is smaller, and she was able to run around trees and under branches. And for some reason, these bounty hunters weren't able to do that. Like for instance, Leia would just run around a tree, and these bounty hunters would run into the tree, like it was a major obstacle. I just found it weird that they did it in this way. I know they did it to drag the scene on, and I do admit it was kind of tense, but at the same time it was like they could have caught her so easily. The other thing about this is that sure, Leia is a child and she can run around pretty quick, but adults can run faster than children. They should have been able to catch her with ease. There is another thing that bothered me a little bit towards the end of the episode. So at the end of the episode, Obi-Wan finally decides to leave the planet to try and find Leia. And there's a problem with this. This action just creates a plot hole within the Star Wars universe. It is established in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, that Obi-Wan Kenobi never left the planet. And we are to assume that he never left the planet, and that he watched over Luke all this time. In Episode 3, we were told that Obi-Wan would be the sole person to watch over Luke, and to not leave the planet, and this action goes completely against that. The way they could have gotten away with this is if they had a different person watch over Luke. Like maybe Ahsoka could have looked after him, or I don't know. But seeing Obi-Wan leave the planet is just really weird. So what would I rate Episode 1 of Kenobi? I would rate the first episode a 9 out of 10. We are given solid foundation to the storyline, we are introduced to our villains, and our one villain does seem compelling enough, for now. I also really like the brutality and the flashbacks that we get in this episode. I like the fact that we are not immediately introduced to Darth Vader, and that they left that for later. Yes, there was the plot hole and that chase scene. That was the only reason why I took a point out of my rating. If it wasn't for the chase scene or the plot hole, this would have been a 10 out of 10, easy. Now, we go on to Episode 2. This episode was definitely different from the first episode, and there are more problems in this episode than there are in the first. But, as usual, I will point out the positive parts about it first. First good thing about this episode is the fact that we are on a totally different planet that we have never seen in Star Wars before. The name of that planet is Daiyu. This planet is a lot like Coruscant. It has flashing lights everywhere, there's a lot of crime, and yeah, that's very sweet about that planet. We also get a lot more of Leia's character, and again, she is very good at acting. We also get a cameo from a clone trooper, obviously played by Tamora Morrison. The clone trooper was poor, begging for money, and it was quite emotional to see Obi-Wan have the realization of the fact that this is a retired clone. There is a lot more comedy in this episode, and it's not overbearing, and it works pretty well. I also really like the fact that they ended the episode by showing Vader in his Bacta tank. This makes me excited, because the next episode is more than likely going to show a lot more Darth Vader. To be honest, there's not much to say about this episode, besides the parts that I kind of didn't like. Most of the episode was pretty good, but the last 15 minutes is where the show took a weird turn. So we learn that Reva has found where Kenobi is, and he is obviously hiding from her, while Leia starts the ship so they can escape. While Reva was trying to find Kenobi, she said something that was kind of shocking to me, as well as disappointing that it happened in this manner. Reva reveals to Kenobi that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader. What the hell? First question, how the heck does she know that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader? Nobody but the Emperor knows who he really is, as of right now. I really hope that they explain how she knows this information, and I really wish Obi-Wan wouldn't have found out in this way. It kind of takes it out for me in a way, and I will explain why. The way I wanted Obi-Wan to find out about who Darth Vader really was is when they fight. My ideal way of Obi-Wan finding out is in the same way that Ahsoka Tano found out in Rebels. If you have seen Rebels, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but I will still explain anyway. So in Rebels, Ahsoka Tano is dueling Darth Vader, and she gets a good swipe at his helmet, exposing his face. This is how Ahsoka Tano finds out that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader. I would have wanted it to happen in the same way with Obi-Wan. I know it wouldn't be original, but it would still be very emotional to see. I feel like it would have made more of an impact if Obi-Wan learned in this way, and not in the way that is shown. My second issue with this episode is Reva killing the Grand Inquisitor. I'm gonna be calm and assume that he is still alive, because if he is killed, then that directly contradicts Star Wars Rebels. The Grand Inquisitor was killed in Rebels, so we know for a fact that he is still alive. So this is just a random twist, as in, oh my god, she betrayed her master. I really don't agree with it. I don't understand why they had to make it seem like she killed the Grand Inquisitor, but in my opinion, Darth Vader would have her ass. Why would she do something so stupid? She knows that she can't go back to the Inquisitor's training base because she will be confronted by Darth Vader. To me, it was such a stupid thing to put in the show, and it was just to raise the stakes, but it makes no sense to us because it was never mentioned in Rebels. And I really hope that he's not killed, because if he's dead, that's going to directly contradict Rebels. Okay, rant over. So what would I rate this episode? I would rate this episode a 6 out of 10. I enjoyed this episode quite a lot, but it wasn't as good as the first episode. And yes, I did expect that, but I didn't expect the twist in the show. Twists can be done very well or really badly, and this episode I felt like they did it really badly. Let me remind you that I am speaking of this right after episode 2, so I've not seen the other episodes yet. I really hope they have a good explanation as to how Reva knows who Darth Vader really is. They can't just have a bombshell like that dropped and not explain how she knows. The other one is how infuriating it is that they seem to have killed off the Grand Inquisitor. I really hope that is not true. I have trust in Deborah Chow, and if you didn't know, she's the director of this season. I have full trust in her to explain how she knows who Darth Vader is, but I still can't excuse her showing the Grand Inquisitor get murdered. This is why I rated the episode a 6 out of 10. I really enjoyed the episode, but I can't get over those flaws. I'm pretty sure that the next episode is going to revolve around Darth Vader, and I hope we get a lot out of him. So, I expect the next episode to be really good. This episode was really well done. It wasn't as entertaining in the beginning as the other 2 episodes, but the ending was definitely worth it. We got to see a lot more of Darth Vader than we did in any of the episodes, and that was a real highlight for this episode. I feel like we got more of the dark side than anything else, and this episode was a lot more intense as well. Leia and Obi-Wan were on this planet, and they had to get to a spaceport before they were caught, and there were a lot of tense scenes while they were doing that. We had a pretty good scene where Leia and Obi-Wan were in the back of a vehicle, and there were a bunch of stormtroopers on that vehicle as well. And it was very tense because Leia and Obi-Wan had to get their story straight, or else the stormtroopers would have figured them out. To be honest, there's not that much to really say about the first half of this episode. I thought it was okay, and the only good scenes were when the stormtroopers were involved, and when they were trying to get their story straight, and seeing Anakin. The real highlight is definitely Darth Vader. I have to just talk about him. One standout thing that I noticed about his character was that his voice sounded identical to the original trilogy. It was kind of creepy. We actually kind of learn why Reva is so hell-bent on getting Obi-Wan. It's because Darth Vader wanted her to find him, which I honestly really like how they did that. What I'm basically getting out of it is that Darth Vader wants her to find Obi-Wan, and as soon as she finds Obi-Wan, that she would tell Darth Vader, and Darth Vader would deal with him. Now we know why she's so interested in him. Now we just need to figure out how she knows who Darth Vader really is. I gotta talk about the fight itself as well. We get a scene where Obi-Wan is running away from Darth Vader, trying to find an escape, and this actually reminds me of the classic horror movies, like Friday the 13th, where the victims are running as fast as they can, and somehow the villain still gets them. That's exactly what this feels like. The actual fight itself was pretty good, but my only issue with it was the fact that they would jump between the lightsaber duel and the other characters. I just wanted to see one long shot of Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fighting each other. Hopefully if they do fight again in this series, we will get more of a long shot. I also like the little detail that Darth Vader was only using the lightsaber with one arm, and he was still beating Obi-Wan to a pulp. The end of the fight was actually pretty brutal, and I was surprised that they had such a scene in a Star Wars show. Darth Vader literally dragged Obi-Wan through fire to get him critically injured. This was done so then Obi-Wan could experience the same kind of pain that Darth Vader once experienced. I thought that was amazing, and I really hope they continue this brutality in Star Wars. Speaking of the brutality, we got more of Darth Vader trying to lure Obi-Wan out by literally snapping the necks of innocent people and dragging them through the dirt with the Force. I just found it so awesome, because we're getting to the point where we're actually seeing how brutal Darth Vader can be in live action. We've seen it in the comics, and I really hope we get to see more brutality out of him. So, what would I rate this episode? I think I would rate it a 7 out of 10. Now that number may seem pretty low for having Darth Vader of all people in it, but the first half of this episode was not boring, but slow. I honestly think it was more of I know Darth Vader is going to show up at some point kind of thing, because I was just excited to see him. But I do like the fact that we got Darth Vader in this, and we got to see him be him, in a sense. I have no idea where this series is going to go next, because there's only 3 episodes left. So hopefully we get another face-off with Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And hopefully we get to see Qui-Gon at some point. Anyways, that's it for episode 3. Now, let's talk about episode 4. This episode wasn't a good episode. There were only a few scenes that were pretty good, and there was one mess up that I really didn't agree with. I guess I'll talk about the good parts first. And that was the one scene where Kenobi went to save Leia, and they were running from the stormtroopers. That was the only scene that was actually really good. I like the fact that it seems like Kenobi had better control over his lightsaber this time, meaning that he was able to deflect the blaster shots pretty well, and that was pretty good. And there was also a part where they were in the hallway that was underwater. So one of the windows was cracked and he had to hold in the water. That was also pretty good as well. Otherwise, this episode wasn't good and it was boring. I got the vibe off of this episode that it was supposed to be a very tense episode, but I felt no emotion to any of the characters, and there were some deaths and it just didn't hit me. We learned that Leia has been kidnapped and is now at the base where the Inquisitors are, but we were never told who caught her and how she got caught. Then we had the cliche bad guy trying to be a good guy, and it just didn't work for me at all. One of the things that was done during this scene was Reva trying to do her mind read on Leia, but she couldn't get past Leia's mind. And I thought that was a little weird, because it's like, Leia's only 10 years old, and you weren't able to get past the 10-year-old mind? There was one other thing that I enjoyed, where the rebel disguised as an Empire troop got her way out of many things, and she was very good at talking her way out of issues and keeping a low profile. Another thing that bothered me was when Leia was in the chamber where she was going to be tortured, Reva had to deal with the distraction that was created by the other rebel, and Leia was in their torture room with 2 other stormtroopers, and then Kenobi came to save her, but no alarms went off. And wouldn't you think there would be cameras in that room and motion sensors and stuff to warn Reva that, hey, maybe someone is in that room that shouldn't be? We do learn something interesting in this episode, where apparently in the lower levels of this Inquisitor base is basically a tomb for the fallen Jedi. I guess in a sadistic way, it's kind of like a trophy room for the Empire. I was honestly waiting for a cameo from a Jedi we had seen before, but we didn't. Which is fine and understandable, but the scariest part about it is that they even had younglings. It's an interesting aspect of this base that I don't think was ever introduced, and this is the first time where they introduced this horrific secret within the Empire, and it's just kind of neat that they showed something like that. There is this other weird scene too. After Obi-Wan had saved Leia, they had to sneak their way out of the base, and it was so weird. Do you know why? Because of Obi-Wan's disguise. He literally had a trench coat with a hat, and Leia was hiding under the trench coat. What in God's name was that disguise? You're telling me there were hundreds of stormtroopers around, and not one of them thought it was a little weird that somebody in a really large trench coat was just walking around? I don't know, man. This episode was just whack. We get a tease of what Reva went through when she was a kid, but still nothing really. We keep on getting little details about her backstory, and with only 2 episodes left, it's like you're giving us so little to go off of that she just feels like a one-dimensional character. I feel like now she's just put into the story just to be the bad guy and nothing else. Like they didn't know what to do with her character. I started off this series trying to be optimistic about this villain, but I'm not connecting to this villain at all. And she's not written very well, and I'm just not connecting with this character. She's just a cliche villain that's very likely going to die at the end of the series, or she's going to say something shocking, and then we're not going to find out until next season. Speaking of that, I'm going to talk about the scene I really didn't like, and surprisingly enough, I gotta say it's the same scene with Darth Vader in it. I admit, every single scene with Darth Vader is immediately better than all the other scenes, but this one was just different. Earlier, Reva let Obi-Wan and Leia go, on purpose, not because she couldn't get to them in time. Obviously, this enrages Darth Vader, and when we finally get to see him angry, he enters the room in a very intimidating and loud voice and force holds Reva, and it looks like he's about to kill her. And I'm like, yes, kill her, because she didn't complete her task like she was told to. In typical Vader fashion, you would think that was the end of her, and she'd be killed. But no. For some stupid reason, Darth Vader does not kill her. He gives her a second chance. Darth Vader doesn't do that. Have these writers completely forgotten that Darth Vader hates the Inquisitors? And that if they fail once, they're dead? Let me give you an example. In Jedi Fallen Order, when Trilla fails at the end of the game, Darth Vader kills her immediately, no hesitation at all. So her first time that she ever fails, she is murdered. Why is Reva not murdered the first time that she has messed up? Actually, in fact, this isn't the first time that she's messed up. She's messed up on multiple occasions, and Darth Vader has let her live? Why? There's a small part of me that believes that the writers were too afraid to make Darth Vader the main villain of this series, so they just made up a new character just to have them as the villain, so then they don't have to have Darth Vader be a mean villain. I think that's what's going on here, and admittedly, it kind of makes sense because they don't want to destroy Darth Vader's legacy, but at the same time, it's like, come on. I thought what would have been better was that Darth Vader kill Reva and the fifth brother then take charge of everything, because it seems like he's more competent than Reva. In the first few episodes, we got a lot more of the fifth brother, but now suddenly he's a side character, and I feel like he does a better job at everything than Reva, so I don't know what's going on there. This episode was a real disappointment for me, because the last episode ended on a very high note, so it's depressing that this episode fell so hard compared to the other three. I hope we get some sort of character development from Reva, and I really hope they don't have her just turn to the light side without Darth Vader killing her, because that would be a crime. So, my rating for this episode is ironically 4 out of 10. There were only 3 good scenes, and that third scene ended horribly, so I really hope the next episode is a lot better than this one. After seeing this episode, I'm terrified for the next 2 episodes, and that's the other thing. There are only 2 episodes left of this show, and I really don't know how this is going to end. The only other way I can see this series ending well is with another fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. Anyways, I hope episode 5 is better than this, so let's go on to that one. So, I can say immediately that this is the best episode of the season so far. This was a major difference from the last episode. It was really, really bad, and I'm very surprised that this episode was so good. Before I get into the really juicy part of this episode, I'm going to talk about some little things first. I really like that we got to see some flashbacks in this episode. The flashback that we see is Anakin and Obi-Wan training. What they are doing is having a practice duel, and this is actually pretty neat because we never really see this aspect of being a Jedi. I like in this episode how they incorporate flashbacks with the current story. What they are basically doing is Obi-Wan says something about Darth Vader, like he always wants to prove himself, and then we'll get a flashback of Anakin trying to prove to Obi-Wan that he is a better duelist. I really like this aspect because it gives more context as to what's going on without it being too exposition-y. So, Basically, the premise of this episode is that all of these refugees must leave the planet before the Empire gets to them. They are trying as hard as possible to escape this planet before the Empire arrives, and this is where Obi-Wan steps up. We finally have Obi-Wan back at full strength. He seems to have recovered mentally, and now he is physically ready to fight. He gives a great speech that really shows that he is back, and it just brings back so much nostalgia from the Clone Wars TV show as well as the prequels. In the very beginning of this episode, Reva is given the rank of Grand Inquisitor. This is a great accomplishment because this means that she is in charge of all of the other Inquisitors. She is ordered by Darth Vader to find and detain Obi-Wan, so then Obi-Wan is ready for Darth Vader's arrival. Reva arrives on the planet and orders her troops to start shooting at the door to try and break it open. This happens during Obi-Wan's speech, and Obi-Wan tells everybody what their strategy should be, and he tries to speak with Reva through the blast doors. Obi-Wan puts his ear behind the door to speak to Reva, and this is where we finally learn how Reva knows that Darth Vader is really Anakin Skywalker. She explains to Obi-Wan that she was a youngling and was at the Jedi Temple the night Order 66 was enacted. She said she thought that Anakin was there to help them, but then he started killing her friends, and then she pretended that she was dead herself so she could escape safely. Obi-Wan then realizes that Reva really isn't on Darth Vader's side, but she is in fact just trying to gain Darth Vader's trust so she can get revenge upon him. I got to say that this is really good because it's an original storyline and a pretty neat twist. I usually would have been pretty mad at the fact that she would turn to the good side because we never seem to have a villain who stays the villain, but in this, it makes sense to what her end goal is. There is one problem I have with this though, and that's the fact that how did she play dead in the Jedi Temple? I looked at the flashbacks very carefully, and you can clearly tell Darth Vader was killing all of her friends that were very close to her, and Darth Vader would have killed her right there. So how would she be able to play dead? It would make sense that Darth Vader wasn't able to get everyone in the temple. That's why later on, he left. He had other clone troopers sweep the area to make sure all of the Jedi and younglings were all dead. This just doesn't make sense, because they did such a thorough job getting through the Jedi Temple that there's no way they missed one youngling, especially when it was Darth Vader himself that killed them. It's a little plot hole, but I can overlook it. So now we know the motives of Reva. I think she's a bit psychotic that she thinks she can step up to Vader, of all people, but that's just me. After this, Obi-Wan does the typical Jedi thing where he tries to persuade Reva into joining them and fighting Darth Vader together. She is still on edge about this, and on the outside, she pretends like she doesn't care for that, but we all know on the inside that she really wants to step up to Vader and stop all of this madness. After this, Reva gets angry. She opens the blast doors with her lightsaber. We get this huge shootout, and the refugees are pushed back to the landing bay. While this is happening, we get a character death, and that is Tala. It was her and one of the robots that died, and as Tala was on the ground after being shot, the robot stands over her to protect her. And then at the last moment, she ignites a thermal detonator. Now, this is my second time watching this episode, and after watching the first time, I saw some videos online talking about how sad and dramatic this was, and I have to say, I felt nothing during this scene. She was only really in episode 4, and that was an awful episode, so I really didn't have an attachment to her character. Yes, it was very noble death, But by no means was this a sad moment. So, this is where the fun begins. After the death scene, Obi-Wan says that he's going to surrender himself because Vader only wants him. So, Obi-Wan surrenders himself. He has a little talk with Reva, and Reva basically tells him to go away. Darth Vader then arrives and asks Reva where Obi-Wan is, and Darth Vader enters the base and notices that a lot of stormtroopers are dead. He then arrives at the landing bay, and oh boy, this is where the show shoots right up to 10. Right as Darth Vader enters the landing bay, the ship tries to fly away, but before they can get away, Darth Vader grasps the ship with the Force and pulls it down to the ground. This reminds me a lot of The Force Unleashed, where Starkiller brings down that Star Destroyer with the Force, and this is awesome. Once Vader forces the ship down to the ground, he forces the doorway open and rips half of the ship apart, only to realize that nobody was in there. And then it was a decoy ship, and then the real ship flies off and escapes. So this was amazing and all, but there was one thing that would have made this even better. Before I come up with these thoughts, I just want to say I understand that this is geared towards children, but I just would have liked this scene if it was framed this way. So, I would want the same events that happened exactly the same, but when the second ship starts to take off, he then grasps that ship, brings that to the ground, and kills everyone in the ship. I know, Obi-Wan and Leia were in this ship, so they could have had it where they were in a different ship, just to distract the Empire. It would have made it more impactful if he just killed everyone on the second ship, and that's why I said, I know this is supposed to be geared towards children. So they probably wanted to do that, but they just couldn't because Disney said, no, you can't do that. Anyways, after this, Reva sneaks up behind Darth Vader and tries to kill him, but obviously this doesn't work. This is where it gets even better. So instead of a real lightsaber duel, we kind of get a Force lightsaber duel, in a sense. Reva tries to kill Vader again and again and again with the lightsaber, but Darth Vader literally uses the Force to deflect her lightsaber hits. He is wiping the floor with her, and it is amazing to watch Darth Vader finally show off his true power in the series. Darth Vader's lack of respect comes to a point where he doesn't even use his own lightsaber to fight her. He splits her lightsaber in half and starts fighting her with her own lightsaber. I just find it so amazing how this was choreographed. I wish they showed us this earlier in the season. This is where the big twist of the series comes in as well. So, as soon as Darth Vader defeats Reva, with ease by the way, the Grand Inquisitor arrives. We all knew that he survived because apparently his species has 2 stomachs, and this is why he survived that lightsaber strike earlier in the season. We've ended up learning that Darth Vader knew all along who Reva was, and what she was planning to do, and that Darth Vader was basically just using her. Apparently the Grand Inquisitor was in on it as well, so in the end, this is what Darth Vader really is all about. He's all about that psychological warfare. As well, he makes you feel like you're part of the team, but once you get too powerful, he just executes you. I'm a man who likes to admit when he's wrong, and I am wrong. I think I was too harsh on this series, because in my own small mind, I was just wanting to see action from the series, and just see amazing things, and we finally got that in this episode, and I'm very glad. I think me being such a prequel fan clouded my judgment. I wanted the flashbacks. I wanted to see Darth Vader kick ass, and we finally got that, and I was just complaining throughout the whole season that we weren't getting it. I was wrong because I just needed to be patient with this show. Admittedly, episode 4 is still awful, but in the end, this show has made a complete 180. This show is really good, and I hope the next episode is even better. So, In my past reviews for the last few episodes, where I said that Darth Vader would have killed Reva all along, I was obviously very angry about that, because nobody messes with Darth Vader and gets away with it. But now that we have context as to what was going on there, I actually kind of feel dumb. I should have known at the time that this would make no sense for them to do this, and that something was up. And now that is confirmed. Next time I'm going to make sure that I will talk about that, but I will also need to remember that it's only halfway through the season, and there's sure to be an explanation. If there is no explanation after the season is over, then yes, I will obviously rant about it. So, what would I rate this episode? I would rate this episode a sweet 9 out of 10. This episode had everything that I wanted. It showed us that Darth Vader indeed is not to be messed with, and that he is still the Darth Vader we all know and love. We got the Grand Inquisitor back. We got a good reason as to why all this seemed really weird. It had a good twist, and we finally got Darth Vader teaching Reva that you do not mess with him. And the most important part is that we got flashbacks with Anakin and Obi-Wan. I also forgot to mention that they had the same type of lightsaber dueling that they had in the prequels. I knew Disney had it in them to have proper lightsaber dueling. It just didn't have to take them this long to show us that. Anyways, this episode was everything that I wanted out of the show, and the only reason why I gave you the 9 out of 10 was because there were some parts that were a little funky. The next episode is the season finale, and it's rumored to be 1 hour and 30 minutes long. So, hopefully we get some good stuff out of this. Okay, so episode 6 wasn't that bad. I am having a hard time thinking whether this is the best episode or episode 5 being the best. I'm not really sure, to be honest. So I will tell you the best parts about this, and then I'll tell you the stuff that I don't agree with. Obviously, the best part of this is the duel between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. This one is much better than the first one. The lightsaber dueling was very realistic, and it was reminiscent of the prequel trilogy. The one thing that I wanted so badly in this episode was to see Darth Vader's helmet messed up, and hear the classic sound of him having trouble breathing. I am so happy to say that we got both of them, and it was a very emotional scene, to be honest. A lot more emotional than I thought it would be. I think what really sold it was Ewan McGregor. He absolutely sold it when it came to him reminiscing about the past, and he straight up apologized to Darth Vader, saying, "I am sorry, I have failed you." He specifically said, "I am sorry that I failed you, Anakin," and Darth Vader replies with, "Anakin is no more. I killed him." I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what happened. It was a very emotional scene, and I'm happy that we got this. It was everything I wanted in a lightsaber duel between Vader and Obi-Wan. The one question that I do have about it is, why did Obi-Wan not finish off Darth Vader, and why did he leave him? I think it's a simple answer, and the answer is the fact that Obi-Wan still saw Anakin, and he just didn't have it in him to kill him. This was the same thing in Revenge of the Sith, where Obi-Wan could have killed Darth Vader, but he decided not to because he still saw Anakin. There wasn't much else to this episode, to be honest. We of course got a resolution to Reva's story, and it is insinuated that we will get more of her in the future, which I have opinions about. Actually, to be honest, that was really all there was to this episode. I'm not saying that's bad, but it was stretched out pretty well. The end of the episode made it seem like we won't see Obi-Wan again, which is unfortunate, because I would like to see him again. Anyways, Obi-Wan meets Luke, and Luke now knows who Ben is. We also get a wonderful cameo from Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn. It was a small 10-second little thing, but it was still very nice to see him again. And hopefully if we ever do get a season 2 of Obi-Wan, that we will see more of Qui-Gon. We also get the last scene with Darth Vader, and we get a cameo from the Emperor, which is pretty cool to see. He questions Darth Vader's thoughts on Obi-Wan, thinking that Darth Vader has clouded vision because he cares far too much about Obi-Wan. I have to agree with the Emperor. Darth Vader having the need to kill Obi-Wan has clouded his judgment, and it shows that he still cares in some capacity, and that is a no-no in the Emperor's eyes. Man, this really shows how much I really want a Darth Vader series. So, it's stated in Episode 4, A New Hope, that Luke Skywalker did not know what a lightsaber was, and he did not know what it looked like either. I am mentioning this very specifically because in this episode, Reva goes to Owen Lars's farm, where Luke obviously lives, and her mission was to kill Luke, probably to get the Darth Vader. This is fine and all, but there is one specific scene that made me question this. So, Luke hides in the part of the house he is told to stay, behind the door. Later on, Reva finds out where Luke is hiding, and she goes through the door that Luke is in, and has her lightsaber ignited. While this is happening, Luke escapes through a window. This is on the very, very edge of breaking continuity. You can clearly tell that Reva had her lightsaber ignited in the same room as Luke, and Luke was running out through the window. Now, wouldn't you think he would see the reflection of the lightsaber and then turn around and look for a second and see that, oh my god, this lady has a red blade, what do I do? I'm gonna say it, and I don't care what anybody thinks, but this breaks it for me. It is explicitly said in Episode 4 that Luke had not seen a lightsaber or even knew what a lightsaber was, and it frustrates me that they were thinking of getting this close to seeing a lightsaber. I find it very hard to believe that Luke did not see that lightsaber, and it really annoys me that they had to make it that close. I was gonna talk about Reva a little more in the post-season video, but I will talk about her and her story a little in this episode. So throughout this episode, Reva was so sure that she was going to kill Luke, and then she obviously didn't. She has a change of heart because she didn't want to do what Darth Vader did to her and her friends. She returns back to the farm and gives Owen Lars his son back. I have no issues with this, but what I do have an issue with is the fact that Obi-Wan didn't kill her. I know, that sounds very harsh, but let me explain. So, if you have seen Star Wars Rebels, and I understand if you haven't seen it, that's okay. But, if you've seen Star Wars Rebels, you know that Maul was killed. Obi-Wan and Maul ran into each other on Tatooine, and Maul mentions the fact that Obi-Wan must be protecting something or someone. And as soon as Maul says that, Obi-Wan ignites his lightsaber, ensuing in a very quick duel between Obi-Wan, and Maul loses and dies. That was established in Star Wars Rebels, which is canon, so that means that if they follow the story correctly, Obi-Wan should have killed Reva right there on the spot. Reva says to Obi-Wan that she regrets what she did and that she's worried that she has become Darth Vader. Obi-Wan assures her that she will never be like that because she made the decision to not kill Luke, which makes sense, but at the same time it's a little weird. How does Obi-Wan not know that Reva was just playing mind games because she didn't want to get killed? Remember, Reva was an Inquisitor for many years and has killed many people, so it would make sense if she was just playing a mind game with Obi-Wan. How does Obi-Wan not know that Reva is just going to go back to Darth Vader, tell Darth Vader that Luke is there, and then Darth Vader's going to kill Luke and ruin everything? It just seems out of character for Obi-Wan, especially since it's been shown before that he will take direct action if Luke is threatened. I heard rumors that Reva is supposed to get her own TV show, and it feels like this plot point was shoehorned into the episode just so then we can have a new show for a new character. So, what would I rate episode 6? Well, I would rate it an 8 out of 10. You might be like, hold on. You said you got the perfect deal and it was everything you wanted, so why aren't you rating it higher? While the duel was really well done, I did have many thoughts about this episode that do break continuity a little bit for me. And for me, having continuity broken, especially in Star Wars, really does annoy me. And this is why I rated it only 8 out of 10. The episode was amazing, but that was the only part that was really good. In this episode, everything else just felt forced, because they wanted to have a new series for another character, and that was really it. Because this video is so long, I'm going to have a second video, basically giving you my overall thoughts about the season as a whole, because I have a lot to say about canon, and certain things about characters within this season. A lot of my opinions will be different in the next video, and I will point out many problems I have. Anyways, this is the end of my review for Kenobi, and I will have another video talking about my overall thoughts of the entire season. Thank you all so much for sticking around for this video. I know it's a long one, but I'll see you in the next video.